Paul Bernardo and Karla Homolka, the killers Ken and Barbie. Welcome back to News Hub. For today's video, we're going to have a look at the strange couple that kills people for fun. 3 young women were killed by Canadian serial murderer Paul Bernardo and his wife Karla Homolka between 1987 and 1990. The crimes were dubbed the Ken and Barbie Murders. An odd pair of Canadian murderers, Paul Bernardo and his wife-turned-accomplice Karla Homolka. Though they appeared to be an ordinary young couple at first glance, the Ken and Barbie Killers were actually rather dangerous. Paul Bernardo, now incarcerated for several murders, tortures, and rapes, was a salesperson by day and used the pickup lines and pitches he acquired on the job to entice his female victims. Like he did with his financial acumen, he devoted time and effort to learning how to charm and attract women. He studied American Psycho like his Bible, and his cruel tendencies were only fueled by his marriage to Karla Homolka. The murderers of Ken and Barbie entered the world. Paul Bernardo was ultimately implicated in at least 13 rapes and maybe 4 homicides. A happy childhood for Paul Bernardo. On August 27, 1964, Paul Bernardo entered this world to the joyous anticipation of his parents, Kenneth and Marilyn Bernardo, in Ontario, Canada. In terms of wealth, the Bernardos was a typical, upstanding middle-class family. This seemingly harmless surface, however, hid a sinister underbelly, much like the rest of Paul Bernardo's narrative. It was rumored that Kenneth Bernardo had abused his own daughter when he was arrested for the crime in 1975. As an adult, Paul Bernardo shows no signs of being troubled by this bleak chapter in his youth. He was always happy, a little lad who grinned a lot, according to his contemporaries. His mother's confession that Bernardo was the product of an adulterous affair had no apparent effect on his conduct until he was 16 years old. He started calling his mom names including slob and whore. When he went to school at the University of Toronto, he perfected the art of picking up women in bars only to subject them to public humiliation and physical violence. Paul Bernardo was affable and attractive, 2 traits he, unfortunately, utilized to his advantage in his manipulation of women. A far darker need would eventually overwhelm him though. Rapist Paul Bernardo strikes Scarborough. Scarborough, an Ontario suburb, was hit by a string of heinous incidents beginning in May of that year. A young woman was viciously raped as she walked home from catching the bus early on May 4, 1987, not far from her parents' house. In the next week, 2 additional attacks of this type would occur. Authorities concluded that the attacks on women between the ages of 15 and 21 had all been carried out by the same man, who was quickly dubbed the Scarborough Rapist by the media. The attacks on all of the women included beatings, intense verbal abuse, and dire threats to discourage victims from going to the police. Paul Bernardo, sometimes known as the Scarborough Rapist, went on a nearly 5-year spree during which he sexually assaulted or tried to sexually assault at least 19 young women. All the victims were young women, and most of the attacks happened at bus stops, but at least one of the victims was only 15 years old. A few of Bernardo's victims fought him off, and the police interviewed him twice, but they never formally accused him of anything. One of Bernardo's victims didn't provide authorities with a detailed description of her assailant until May of 1990, by which time the Scarborough Rapist had grown even more psychotic. He wed Karla Homolka. A 23-year-old Paul Bernardo had first met a 17-year-old Karla Homolka in 1987. Homolka was the eldest of 3 children born to Dorothy and Carol Homolka in Ontario in 1970. She was a well-adjusted, attractive, educated, and popular young lady, and her love of animals prompted her to begin working at a veterinary clinic soon after graduation. Just like Bernardo, nothing about Homolka's external look suggested the vileness that lay beneath. The attraction between Bernardo and Homolka was instantaneous, and it only grew stronger once Bernardo learned that Homolka, unlike the other ladies he had dated, shared his filthy desires. Within a short time, Bernardo had Homolka serving as his consenting slave in a sadomasochistic relationship. Paul Bernardo was viciously raping females in Scarborough, with Homolka's knowledge and agreement the whole time they were together. It didn't take long for Bernardo to propose to Homolka. Homolka said to a friend, "Paul and I are happier than ever. He is being wonderful and lovely, but that is so typical of my sweetie." 3 years into their relationship, Paul Bernardo was actually starting to become bored. Upon discovering that Homolka was not a virgin, he made a complaint to her and then shifted his perverted attention to Homolka's younger sister, Tammy, who was just 15 at the time. Homolka was not offended by Bernardo's inclinations but rather supported them once more. For Christmas, she informed Bernardo she intended to give him her younger sister's virginity. Homolka took animal anesthetics from her place of employment and used them to poison her own sister during a Christmas celebration at the family home on December 23, 1990. Homolka and her boyfriend took turns raping their sister, Tammy, as the rest of the family slept soundly and Tammy was unconscious that night. Homolka filmed the whole horrific occurrence. Afraid that they might be discovered, the couple tried to cover up Tammy's vomiting before calling an ambulance. The adolescent was taken to the hospital, where she was pronounced dead. Her death was considered an accident due to her choking on her own vomit as a consequence of alcohol intoxication, despite the fact that the unexplained chemical burn on her face was recorded. The killing of Tammy Lynn Homolka did not satisfy Paul Bernardo's thirst for blood. Rather, it made him thirstier for more. Homolka had been living with Paul Bernardo since 1991, when she enticed another kid she had known at work to move in with them. Once again, the pair drugged and assaulted Jane Doe, but this time, she survived and awoke the next day with no recollection of what had happened to her. On the same day that Paul Bernardo and Karla Homolka tied the knot, on June 29, 1991, a canoeing couple discovered human body parts in concrete blocks floating on Lake Gibson. Leslie Mahaffey, who was 14 at the time of her disappearance on June 15, has been identified via her bones. She was taken captive by the people responsible for the deaths of Ken and Barbie, and she was mistreated for days. The murderers were attending a lavish wedding ceremony, complete with a white horse-drawn carriage, at the time of the terrible discovery. On April 16, 1992, nearly a year after their first attack, the pair kidnapped and murdered 15-year-old Kristen French. They dumped her dead in a ditch next to a country road, bruised and with her hair half-shaven. It didn't take long for police to make the connection between the two slayings. Several reports were received when a composite drawing of a man who resembled Paul Bernardo was released. Among them were accounts from co-workers and associates of Bernardo's frightening propensity for violence. After he beat her particularly badly with a flashlight in January 1993, Homolka finally left her husband. A DNA sample collected from Bernardo in early January 1993 matched that of the Scarborough rapist in early February 1993, and he was placed under observation until his arrest. We hope you enjoyed the video, but now that it's over, what did you think? Leave your comments down below, and don't forget to hit that like button. Also, click subscribe if you enjoyed the video and want to see more from us in the future. Thank you for taking the time to watch this.